The blazing Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as Virginia Whitaker stumbled through the dust of Copper Canyon's Main Street, the cruel laughter of townsfolk ringing in her ears. Worthless, they called her, just as her father had for 23 years. With nothing but a small satchel containing her mother's locket and $3 to her name, Virginia kept her head down, determined not to let them see her tears. It was 1879, and the promise of the West had turned to dust for Virginia. Her father, once a respected merchant, had drunk himself to death after her mother's passing, leaving only gambling debts and a tarnished name. The banker had taken their home that morning, and Virginia, with no skills beyond reading and writing, had nowhere to go. "Look at Joseph Whitaker's girl," sneered Mabel Thompson from the general store porch. "Can't even keep her daddy's business afloat, worthless as a three-legged horse." Virginia quickened her pace, her worn boots stirring up clouds of dust. She'd known hardship before, but never such public humiliation. Everyone in Copper Canyon had witnessed her father's decline, and now they watched her fall with equal parts disdain and morbid fascination. At the edge of town stood the Copper Canyon Saloon, where she hoped to find temporary work, anything to earn enough for a stagecoach ticket elsewhere. As Virginia approached the swinging doors, a commotion erupted inside. A man came flying through the doorway, landing in the dirt at her feet. "And stay out until you can pay what you owe," shouted a burly bartender. The man groaned, lifting his head. Blood trickled from a split lip, but his eyes, startlingly blue against his sun-weathered face, locked with Virginia's. He wore the dust-covered clothes of a working cowboy, not the flashy attire of a gambler. "Pardon me, miss," he said, struggling to stand. Virginia stepped back. "No need for apologies." The cowboy rose to his full height, brushing dirt from his clothes. "Preston Xavier," he said, extending a hand. "Seems we're both having an unfortunate day." Virginia hesitated before accepting his handshake. Virginia Whitaker, his eyes widened slightly with recognition. Joseph's daughter, she stiffened, waiting for the inevitable judgment. "Yes." Preston nodded thoughtfully. "He was a good man once, before the whiskey," Virginia finished. "But that's not why I'm here. I need work." Preston glanced back at the saloon. "You don't want work in there, Miss Whitaker. Those men will eat you alive." "I don't have many options," she replied stiffly. A wagon rattled past and Preston squinted into the distance. "I'm heading north to the Rocking Pea Ranch. My brother's place. He needs help with the house, cooking and such since his wife passed. It's honest work, fair pay." Virginia studied the cowboy suspiciously. She'd heard enough tales of women lured into trouble by smooth-talking men. "Why would you offer this to a stranger?" Preston Xavier's expression remained earnest. "Because everyone in this town's got you wrong, Miss Whitaker. And I know what it's like to be judged unfairly." He gestured toward the livery stable. "My horse is there. We'd leave at first light tomorrow if you're interested. Think it over." With that, he tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Virginia standing alone with a decision to make. That night, Virginia slept in the church, the only place that would take her in without payment. Pastor Miller's wife had given her stale bread and cold coffee, along with plenty of scripture about the wages of sin, as though Virginia herself were responsible for her father's failings. By morning, her decision was made. Virginia Whitaker had nothing to lose and possibly something to gain. She arrived at the livery before dawn, clutching her small bag. Preston was already there, saddling a sturdy chestnut gelding. A second horse, a dappled mare, stood nearby. "You came," Preston said simply, without surprise. "Don't mistake my decision for trust," Virginia replied. "I'm desperate, not foolish." Preston's mouth quirked into a half-smile. "Fair enough. Ever ridden before? My father sold our horses years ago." "Daisy here is gentle," he said, patting the mare. "She'll treat you kindly if you do the same." The livery owner appeared, eyeing Virginia with undisguised contempt. "Surprised you show your face, girl. Your pa owed me money, too." Preston stepped between them. "Her debt's settled, Tom." "I took care of it." Virginia's head snapped up. I didn't ask you to consider it an advance on your wages, Preston interrupted smoothly. Tom spat tobacco juice onto the ground. Your funeral, Xavier. That girl's worthless, just like her daddy. Virginia flinched, but Preston's expression hardened dangerously. Careful, Tom, that's enough. The livery owner muttered something and retreated into the shadows of the stable. You shouldn't have done that, Virginia said once they were alone. Probably not, Preston agreed, helping her mount Daisy. But sometimes the right thing isn't the sensible thing. They rode out of Copper Canyon as the sun broke over the eastern mountains, painting the desert in hues of gold and rose. Virginia didn't look back at the town that had been her prison for so long. Whatever awaited her at the Rocking P, it couldn't be worse than what she was leaving behind. The day grew hotter as they rode north. Preston was quiet but not unfriendly, pointing out landmarks and sharing occasional stories about the territory. Virginia learned he was 30 years old, had fought briefly in the war when he was just a boy, and had spent most of his life working cattle ranches across Texas and Arizona. My brother Patrick inherited some money from our uncle, Preston explained as they stopped to water the horses at a small creek. Bought the Rocking P 5 years ago. It's not the biggest spread, but the water's reliable and the grazing's good. Virginia splashed water on her face, grateful for its coolness. And his wife, you mentioned she passed. Preston's expression darkened. Catherine, fever took her last winter, left Patrick with their daughter Lily. She's 4 now, needs a woman's care. That's partly why I came to town to find someone suitable. Virginia's stomach tightened. I'm not experienced with children. Can you be kind, patient? Preston asked simply. Yes, she answered. Then you'll manage fine. They continued riding through the afternoon, the landscape changing gradually from desert scrub to rolling grasslands dotted with juniper and pine. As the sun began its descent, a ranch house came into view in the distance, smoke rising from its chimney. That's home, Preston said, a note of pride in his voice. As they drew closer, Virginia took in the sight of the Rocking P. The main house was solidly built of logs with a proper shingled roof. A large barn stood nearby, alongside several corrals and outbuildings. Cattle grazed on the hillsides, and a garden plot next to the house showed signs of careful tending. A man emerged from the barn, clearly Preston's brother, with the same lean build and dark hair, though Preston Xavier's face bore more lines of care. A small girl with blonde pigtails darted out behind him, squealing with delight when she spotted Preston. Uncle Pries, she called, running toward them. Preston dismounted in one fluid motion and swept the child into his arms. There's my Lily Flower. Have you been good for your pa? Most days, Patrick answered for her, approaching with a curious look at Virginia. Didn't expect you back so soon, brother, or with company. Preston set Lily down and helped Virginia dismount. Patrick, this is Miss Virginia Whitaker from Copper Canyon. She'll be helping with the house and Lily, if that suits. Patrick studied Virginia with appraising eyes that held neither judgment nor particular warmth. Can you cook, Miss Whitaker? Yes, she lied, praying she could learn quickly. Better than Mary Rodriguez, I hope, Patrick said with a wry smile. Woman nearly poisoned us last month. Virginia felt a flutter of panic. I'm a plain cook, but food will be edible, Mr. Xavier. Patrick's fine, he replied. We don't stand on ceremony here. He turned to his daughter. Lily, say hello to Miss Whitaker. The little girl regarded Virginia solemnly. Are you going to be my new mama? An awkward silence fell. Patrick's face flushed red beneath his tan. Lily, that's not Miss Whitaker is here to help with the house and look after you sometimes. Virginia knelt to the child's level. I'm just Virginia, and no, I'm not your new mama, but I would like to be your friend if that's all right. Lily considered this, then nodded gravely. Do you know stories? Uncle Pries knows lots, but Papa only knows boring ones about cows. Despite everything, Virginia laughed. I know quite a few stories. My mother taught me. Good, Lily declared, apparently satisfied. She grabbed Virginia's hand. Come see my chickens. Patrick nodded his permission, and Virginia allowed herself to be led away by the child, leaving the brothers to talk privately. The chickens, a motley collection of hens supervised by an imperious rooster, occupied a well-built coop adjacent to the garden. Lily proudly introduced each one by name, chattering away as though she'd known Virginia forever. "That's Queenie, she lays the biggest eggs, and that spotted one is Freckles. The black one is Shadow." Virginia smiled, feeling some of her tension ease. Children, at least, didn't carry preconceptions or harbor grudges about family names. Later, after a simple supper of beans and cornbread that Patrick had prepared, Virginia was shown to a small but clean room off the kitchen. It contained a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a washstand, modest accommodations, but far better than she'd expected. "It's not much," Preston apologized, setting her bag on the chest. "It's perfect," Virginia replied honestly. "Thank you." Preston lingered in the doorway. "Patrick's a good man, just worn down with grief and responsibility. Lily's been asking for a mother figure since Catherine died." Virginia felt a pang of inadequacy. "I'll do my best with her. That's all anyone can ask." Preston's blue eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Rest well, Miss Whitaker." "Virginia," she corrected, "if we're not standing on ceremony." His smile was gentle. "Virginia, then, good night." That night, for the first time in years, Virginia slept deeply and without fear. The weeks that followed established a rhythm to life at the Rocking P. Virginia rose before dawn each day to start the fire and prepare breakfast. Her cooking skills improved with practice and the discovery of Catherine's recipe book, tucked away in a kitchen drawer. Patrick was fair but reserved, appreciative of her efforts but maintaining a careful distance. Lily, however, blossomed under Virginia's attention, following her around like a devoted puppy. Preston came and went, sometimes spending days out with the cattle or riding to neighboring ranches on business. When present, he often sought Virginia's company, sharing stories of his travels or teaching her to ride Daisy properly. Unlike the others in her life, Preston never seemed to find her lacking. One evening in late summer, Virginia sat on the porch mending one of Lily's dresses while the child played nearby with a cornhusk doll. Preston approached from the barn, his shirt sleeves rolled up, revealing muscular forearms browned by the sun. "Finish your chores." Virginia asked, setting aside her sewing. Preston settled on the step below her. "For now, Patrick's got me riding fence tomorrow." He watched Lily playing. "She's different with you here, happier." "Children are resilient," Virginia replied. "They need consistency most of all." "Something you didn't have much of growing up." Virginia's needle paused. "My mother tried. After she died, my father changed." Preston nodded. "Patrick was the same after Catherine. If not for Lily needing him, I'm not sure he'd have found his way back." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Preston spoke again. "There's a social gathering next Saturday in Pinewood. The whole ranch is invited. Patrick, too, though he won't go. Would you consider attending? With me?" Virginia stared at him, startled. "As your friend," Preston finished quickly, "or whatever you'd like to call it. I just thought you might enjoy meeting people who don't know your history, a fresh start." The idea was both terrifying and tempting. "I don't have anything suitable to wear. Catherine's things are still packed away." "She was about your size. I'm sure Patrick wouldn't mind." Virginia considered it. The thought of wearing a dead woman's clothes felt strange, but the opportunity to appear respectable even just for one evening was too tempting to resist. "All right," she agreed finally. "I'll go." Preston's smile was worth the risk. The following Saturday, Virginia stood before the small mirror in her room, hardly recognizing herself. Preston Xavier's blue calico dress fit surprisingly well after minor alterations. She had arranged her brown hair in a simple but elegant style and pinned her mother's locket at her throat. A knock at her door announced Lily, who gasped in delight. "You look like a princess," Virginia laughed. "Hardly that, but thank you." Patrick appeared behind his daughter, his expression unreadable as he took in Virginia's transformed appearance. "Catherine wore that dress to our wedding celebration," he said quietly. Virginia's smile faltered. I can change. No, Patrick interrupted. She would have wanted it used, not gathering dust. He cleared his throat. Preston's waiting outside. Don't let him keep you out too late. The social was held in Pinewood's newly constructed town hall, a respectable wooden building decorated with paper lanterns and bunting. Musicians played lively tunes as couples danced, and tables laden with food lined one wall. As Preston had predicted, no one in Pinewood knew of Virginia's past. Here, she was simply Preston Xavier's companion, treated with the courtesy that status afforded. For one magical evening, the word worthless didn't hang over her like a curse. You dance beautifully, Preston commented as they whirled around the floor to a waltz, Virginia flushed with pleasure. My mother taught me. She believed every young lady should know how to dance, even if opportunities were rare. She was right, Preston said, his hand warm and steady at her waist. You deserve more evenings like this, Virginia. The sincerity in his voice made her heart flutter. This is enough, she replied softly. Preston's gaze lingered on her face. Is it? Before she could answer, the music ended and other dancers crowded around them. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them, a tentative possibility neither dared to name. Later, as they rode home beneath a canopy of stars, Virginia felt a contentment she'd never known. Preston kept Daisy close to his own mount, occasionally reaching over to adjust Virginia's reins or point out constellations overhead. Thank you, she said as the lights of the ranch house came into view. For tonight, for the job, for everything. Preston reined his horse to a stop, Virginia doing the same. In the moonlight, his expression was earnest. You know they were wrong about you in Copper Canyon. Virginia looked away. They had their reasons. No, Preston said firmly. They didn't. You're not defined by your father's mistakes or by what others say about you. He reached across the space between them to touch her hand. You're worth so much more than you believe, Virginia Whitaker. The words, so simple yet profound, brought tears to her eyes. For years, she'd carried worthless like a brand, believing it in her heart. Preston's certainty made her wonder if perhaps she'd been wrong. We should get back, she said finally, unable to trust her voice with more. Preston nodded, understanding her need for space. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but Virginia felt lighter somehow, as though a burden had begun to shift. Autumn arrived with cooler temperatures and the demanding work of the fall roundup. For 2 weeks, Virginia barely saw Preston or Patrick as they worked from dawn till dusk gathering cattle and preparing for winter. She kept the home fires burning, quite literally, ensuring hot meals and clean clothes awaited the exhausted men each night. When the work was finally done, Preston surprised her with an offer to teach her to shoot. A woman alone needs to protect herself, he explained, leading her to a clearing behind the barn with a row of bottles set up on a fallen log. Virginia handled the revolver uncertainly. I've never fired a gun before. Your stance is most important, Preston said, moving behind her to position her arms, his chest pressed against her back as he adjusted her grip. Keep both eyes open, breathe steady, and squeeze the trigger gently. Virginia tried to focus on his instructions rather than his proximity, but her heart raced traitorously. When she pulled the trigger, the recoil startled her, sending the bullet wide of its target. Not bad for a first attempt, Preston encouraged. Try again. By the end of the afternoon, Virginia had hit 3 bottles and felt a new confidence in her abilities. As they walked back to the house, Preston's hand brushed hers, then caught it deliberately, twining their fingers together. Virginia glanced up at him, questioning, Is this all right? Preston asked, suddenly uncertain. In answer, Virginia tightened her grip. Yes. They walked hand in hand back to the ranch, neither speaking, both acutely aware of the line they'd just crossed. That evening, after Lily was tucked into bed, Preston found Virginia on the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the chill. May I join you? He asked. Virginia nodded, making room on the bench. Preston sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. I've been thinking, he began carefully, about what happens when winter ends. Virginia tensed. Her position at the ranch had always been understood as temporary. I suppose I'll need to find other work, or, Preston said, his voice low, you could stay. As the housekeeper. Preston turned to face her, taking her hands in his. No, Virginia, as my wife. The words hung in the air between them. Virginia stared at him, certain she'd misheard. Your wife, I know it's sudden, Preston continued quickly. And I'm not a wealthy man. I've got my share of the ranch and my savings, enough to build us a small place of our own on rocking pea land. But I can promise to cherish you, to protect you, and to spend every day making sure you never doubt your worth again. Virginia's eyes filled with tears. Preston, you don't have to marry me out of pity. His expression grew serious. Is that what you think this is? Pity, what else could it be? A few months ago, I was the town pariah, the worthless daughter of a drunkard. And I was the drifter who couldn't keep a job more than 6 months, Preston countered. We're more than our pasts, Virginia. He released one of her hands to gently tilt her chin up. I'm asking because somewhere between Copper Canyon and now, I fell in love with you. Your strength, your kindness, your way with Lily, everything about you. Love, the word sent a tremor through Virginia's heart. She'd never expected to hear it directed at her, had never dared to hope for such a thing. You don't have to answer now, Preston said, misinterpreting her silence. Take time to think, yes, Virginia interrupted, her voice steady despite her tears. My answer is yes. Preston's face lit with a joy that dispelled any lingering doubt. Slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, almost reverent, but contained a promise of deeper passion to come. When they parted, Preston rested his forehead against hers. You've made me the happiest man in the territory. Virginia smiled through her tears. And I never thought I could be this happy. They stayed on the porch until the stars burned bright overhead, planning their future together, both marveling at how life could change so dramatically in such a short time. The news of their engagement spread quickly through the ranch. Lily was ecstatic, immediately promoting Virginia from friend to almost aunt. Patrick's reaction was more measured, a complicated mix of happiness for his brother and lingering grief for his own lost love. Still, he gave his blessing and offered a plot of land on the eastern edge of the ranch where Preston could build their home. Catherine would approve, Patrick told Virginia privately. She always said Preston needed someone strong enough to keep him grounded, but gentle enough to heal his restless heart. The compliment meant more to Virginia than Patrick could know. As winter settled over the ranch, Preston began preparing for their spring wedding and future home. He rode to Pinewood twice, returning with catalogs from which Virginia could order household necessities. In the evenings, they sat together planning, while during the days, Virginia threw herself into making the ranch house a true home for the holidays, Lily's first Christmas without her mother. One blustery December day, disaster struck. Patrick and Preston had gone to help a neighboring ranch with a collapsed barn after heavy snow. Virginia was alone with Lily when she noticed smoke coming from the barn. Without hesitation, Virginia grabbed her coat and told Lily firmly to stay in the house. Racing to the barn, she found flames already consuming one wall, likely started by a spark from the forge Preston had been using earlier. The horses whinnied in panic, and Virginia knew she had to get them out before the fire spread. Working quickly despite her fear, Virginia managed to lead the frightened animals to safety, all except Preston's stallion, Thunder, who reared and pulled away, retreating deeper into the burning structure. Virginia, Lily's terrified voice came from behind her. Virginia spun around. Lily. I told you to stay in the house. Thunder's still inside, the child cried. Go back to the house right now, Virginia ordered, her voice brooking no argument. As Lily reluctantly obeyed, Virginia took a deep breath and plunged back into the smoke-filled barn. She found Thunder at the far end, eyes rolling in fear, his lead rope tangled around a post. Virginia covered her mouth with her sleeve as she worked to free him, the smoke burning her lungs. Finally, the rope came loose. Virginia grabbed Thunder's halter and led him toward the door, but a burning beam crashed down just as they reached it, blocking their exit. Coughing violently, Virginia searched desperately for another way out. Through watering eyes, she spotted the small door to the corral at the back of the barn. With strength born of desperation, Virginia urged the terrified horse through the narrow opening, then squeezed through herself just as another section of the roof collapsed. Outside, she gulped fresh air, leading Thunder to join the other horses in the corral. Her relief was short-lived as she realized Lily was nowhere in sight. "Lily," Virginia screamed, running toward the house. "Lily, where are you?" a small voice answered from inside the barn. "Virginia, help!" Horror struck Virginia's heart. The child must have gone back and looking for her while she was exiting through the rear door. Without hesitation, Virginia ran back toward the burning building, but the heat drove her back. "Lily, can you hear me? Where are you?" Virginia shouted, circling the barn frantically. "The tack room." Came the faint reply. Virginia ran to the small window of the tack room, which was located at the corner of the barn. The fire hadn't reached this section yet, but smoke poured from under the door. Virginia smashed the glass with her elbow and peered inside to see Lily huddled in the corner, coughing. "Lily, come to the window, hurry!" The child stumbled toward her voice. Virginia reached through the broken window, heedless of the glass cutting her arms, and hauled Lily through the narrow opening. Once the child was safe in her arms, Virginia carried her a safe distance from the barn, checking her for injuries. "I'm sorry," Lily sobbed. "I went back to help you." Virginia held her tightly. "It's all right, you're safe now, that's all that matters." They watched helplessly as the barn burned. Virginia had done all she could. The animals were safe, and more importantly, so was Lily. Property could be rebuilt, lives couldn't be replaced. Preston and Patrick returned to find the barn reduced to smoldering ruins and Virginia sitting on a log, holding Lily wrapped in blankets. Both were soot-streaked and exhausted but alive. Preston leapt from his horse before it had fully stopped. "Virginia, Lily." He gathered them both in his arms, his face ashen. "Are you hurt? We're fine," Virginia assured him, though her voice was raspy from smoke. Patrick knelt beside them, examining his daughter with frantic concern. "What happened?" Between coughs, Virginia explained about the fire, the rescue of the horses, and Lily's dangerous venture into the barn. "I'm sorry about the barn," she finished. "I couldn't save it." Preston's expression was incredulous. "The barn, Virginia, I don't care about the barn. You saved the horses and Lily. You could have been killed. It was my responsibility to protect her," Virginia said simply. Patrick, who had been listening silently, suddenly pulled Virginia into a fierce embrace. "Thank you," he whispered hoarsely. "I can never repay you." Later that night, after the doctor had examined both Virginia and Lily and declared them smoke-affected but otherwise unharmed, Preston sat beside Virginia's bed. She had finally stopped coughing long enough to rest, but her face was pale against the pillows. "You scared years off my life today," Preston said, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Virginia managed a weak smile. "Not intentionally." Preston took her bandaged hand carefully in his. "Patrick told me what you did, running back into a burning building for Lily, for Thunder. Most men wouldn't have had that courage." "I couldn't let them die," Virginia said simply. Preston's eyes were suspiciously bright. "When I rode up and saw the barn gone, all I could think was that I might have lost you. Nothing else mattered. Not the barn, not the supplies, not even the horses. Just you." Virginia squeezed his hand. "I'm still here." "Yes," Preston said, his voice thick with emotion, "and I thank God for it, because you, Virginia Whitaker, are worth more than everything else on this ranch combined. You're worth my whole life." The words washed over her like a benediction, erasing the last echoes of worthless that had haunted her for so long. In that moment, Virginia finally believed not just intellectually, but in her heart that she had value beyond measure to this man who loved her. "I love you, Preston Xavier," she whispered. He leaned down to kiss her gently. And I love you. Now rest. We have a lifetime ahead of us. Winter passed slowly as Virginia recovered her strength and the men began rebuilding the barn. By the time spring arrived with its promise of renewal, Virginia and Preston's wedding day approached. They had decided on a simple ceremony at the ranch, with only close neighbors and friends in attendance. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. Virginia stood in her room wearing Catherine's wedding dress, which Patrick had preserved carefully in a cedar chest. It was ivory satin, modest but elegant, and fit as though made for her after Virginia's careful alterations. A knock at the door announced Lily, who entered wearing a new blue dress, her blonde hair tied with matching ribbons. "You look beautiful," the child said solemnly. Virginia knelt to hug her. "So do you, my sweet girl." Lily pulled back, suddenly serious. "When you marry Uncle Pries, will you still have time for me?" Virginia's heart melted. "Lily, I will always have time for you. You're part of my family now, and that will never change." Satisfied, Lily took Virginia's hand. "Papa says it's time. Everyone's waiting." Outside, the ranch yard had been transformed. Wooden benches formed rows facing an archway woven with early spring wildflowers. Preston stood beneath it, looking handsome in his best suit, his expression changing to one of wonder as Virginia appeared on Patrick's arm. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. Preston and Virginia exchanged simple vows and rings fashioned from gold Patrick had panned years ago in California. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Preston kissed her with such tenderness that several guests wiped away tears. The celebration afterward was joyful, with music and dancing continuing well into the evening. As twilight fell, Preston led Virginia away from the festivities toward two saddled horses. "I have a surprise for you," he said mysteriously. They rode for about 20 minutes to the eastern edge of the ranch property, where Preston had promised to build their home. As they crested a hill, Virginia gasped. There stood a small but sturdy cabin, smoke curling invitingly from its chimney. "Preston, how did you?" Patrick helped. "So did most of the men you see back at the party." Preston helped her dismount. "It's not finished inside, just the essentials, but I wanted us to have our own place from the start." Virginia walked toward the cabin in wonder. A covered porch wrapped around two sides, and windows gleamed in the fading light. Inside, she found a main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, and two bedrooms, one already furnished with a large bed covered in a wedding quilt Virginia recognized as the handiwork of the neighboring ranchers' wives. "It's perfect," she breathed, turning to embrace her husband. Preston held her close. "It's just the beginning. We'll add on as our family grows." The mention of family sent a warm flush through Virginia. They had spoken of children, both wanting several to fill their home with laughter. "I have something for you too," she said, pulling a small package from her pocket. Inside was a handcrafted leather wallet stamped with Preston's initials. "Open it," Virginia urged. Preston did, finding a tintype photograph inside. Virginia sitting with Lily on her lap, both smiling at the camera. "When did you?" "Last time we were in Pinewood. I wanted you to have something to carry with you when you're away working." Virginia touched his face gently, a reminder of what's waiting at home. Preston's eyes glistened as he carefully tucked the wallet into his jacket pocket over his heart. "The best gift I could receive, though not quite as precious as having the real you beside me for the rest of our days." That night, as they lay together in their new bed, the intimacy they shared was both passionate and tender, a physical expression of the love that had grown between them against all odds. Virginia, who had once believed herself unworthy of love, found herself cherished in ways she'd never imagined possible. "What are you thinking?" Preston asked, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder as she rested against his chest. Virginia smiled in the darkness. "That worthless led me here to you. If I hadn't been cast out of Copper Canyon that day, I would have found you somehow," Preston said with conviction. "Some things are meant to be." "Do you really believe that?" "I do." He kissed her forehead. And I believe we're just starting the best chapter of our story. The years that followed proved Preston right. By their first anniversary, Virginia was expecting their first child, a son they named James. A daughter, Margaret, followed 2 years later. The cabin expanded along with their family, with Preston adding rooms and Virginia creating a home filled with love and laughter. Virginia's skills grew beyond housekeeping. She started a small school for ranch children, including Lily and her own, teaching reading and writing 3 days a week. Her confidence blossomed as she discovered talents she'd never been allowed to develop in Copper Canyon. Preston partnered with Patrick to expand the Rocking P, eventually making it one of the most successful ranches in the territory. Though he still occasionally rode out for cattle drives, Preston always returned eagerly to Virginia and their children, bringing small treasures and endless stories. Lily grew into a beautiful young woman who viewed Virginia as the mother she barely remembered. When she eventually married the son of a neighboring rancher at 19, she asked Virginia to help prepare her for her wedding night, a request that brought tears to Virginia's eyes, tears of gratitude for the family she'd found. 5 years into their marriage, an unexpected visitor arrived at the ranch. Mabel Thompson from the general store in Copper Canyon. Her husband had died, and she was traveling to stay with relatives further north. Virginia received her with grace, offering her a meal and a place to rest her horses. "You've done well for yourself," Mabel observed, looking around the prosperous ranch with barely concealed surprise. Virginia smiled, bouncing baby Margaret on her hip while James played nearby. "I've been blessed." Mabel had the grace to look embarrassed. "We were wrong about you back in Copper Canyon. I'm sorry for how we treated you." "Thank you," Virginia said simply. She had long ago released her bitterness, finding it too heavy a burden to carry into her new life. Later, after Mabel had gone, Preston found Virginia sitting on their porch swing watching the sunset. "You all right?" he asked, settling beside her. Virginia nodded, leaning against his shoulder. "She reminds me of how far I've come, how different life could have been." Preston wrapped his arm around her. "Regrets, not a single one," Virginia answered truthfully. "Everything led me here to you and our children. How could I regret that?" Preston kissed her temple. 10 years ago, I was drifting without purpose. Now I have everything a man could want: a beautiful wife, healthy children, land to work, and peace in my heart." "We've been fortunate," Virginia agreed. "Not just fortunate," Preston corrected. "Blessed beyond measure." As twilight deepened into night, they sat together watching stars appear one by one, their children safely asleep inside. Virginia thought about the young woman who had stumbled through Copper Canyon's streets, believing herself worthless. How astonished that woman would be to see her future loved deeply, valued immeasurably, and finally, completely at home. "What are you smiling about?" Preston asked, noticing her expression. Virginia turned to the man who had changed everything by seeing worth where others saw only worthlessness. "Just thinking that sometimes the most precious things come from the most unlikely beginnings." Preston's answering smile held all the love that had transformed both their lives. "Like us." "Exactly like us," Virginia agreed, as he drew her closer beneath the vast Arizona sky, their hearts beating as one in the home they had built together, not just of wood and stone, but of faith, courage, and enduring love. Years later, when their children were grown with families of their own, Preston and Virginia Xavier sat on that same porch, watching their grandchildren play in the yard of the ranch that had flourished under their care. Their hair had silvered, and time had etched lines on their faces, but the love between them remained as strong as ever. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day in Copper Canyon?" Virginia asked, her hand warm in his. Preston smiled. "I believe I said you were worth my whole life." "And was I?" she teased, already knowing the answer. Preston lifted their joined hands to his lips. "Worth that and more, Virginia Xavier, worth everything."